Welcome back. You're watching The Big Story with me, Akisa Ondera. Thank you for staying with us. I want us to go straight to the National Coordinator for the Institute for Social Accountability, TISA, Wanjiru Gikonyo. She's with us here in studio. Wanjiru, you've been able to listen to what the members of Parliament we have in studio have had to say. The Chuka Igamba Member of Parliament, Patrick Munene, says the CDF kit is not an issue and it is a very key kitty for development. Rashid Kasim, on the other hand, says these kitties that the president has equipped to ensuring austerity measures will be pegged on are key to the development of Kenyans. What are your thoughts surrounding, one, the CDF kitty and some of the austerity measures that have been suggested or proposed by President Uhuru Kenyatta?
Thank you very much, Akisa. And I'd like to start out by just touching on the issue of the Constitution. This allegation that the Constitution is bad, it's expensive, and it's, causing bloat and really affecting the economy adversely. That isn't the case. Because the Constitution was voted for by 75% of Kenyans to redistribute resources throughout the country because there are parts of the country that were not enjoying the benefits of development like other parts of the country. So that's a very important pillar of the Constitution. The problem with the Constitution is the leadership, the lack of leadership in terms of implementation. For instance, Chapter 6 speaks of good governance in our leadership. This includes vetting out of unworthy leaders at elections, making sure we get good candidates who go into Parliament, go into the legislative assemblies. This has not happened. It's not the fault of the Constitution that we have leaders, some leaders, because there are some very good ones, but there are some leaders really who should not be making legislation, exercising oversight over our resources, but they managed to get through because of flaws in the electoral system. This is not because of the Constitution, it is actually because of the lack of the implementation of the Constitution. I would also say that the issue of CDF is another case of non-implementation of the Constitution, because the Constitution clearly identifies two levels of governance. There is the national level and the county level. And these are the two levels of government that have been assigned functions. So CDF does not fit anywhere in this scheme. And the High Court of Kenya clearly ruled itself on this matter and gave Parliament 12 months to comply with the constitutional dispensation. Instead of doing that, Parliament has used very expensive lawyers, high legal costs. We have a case in the Court of Appeal, a case in the Supreme Court. So Parliament is using the court system, the very courts that they have refused to fund properly, that they are underfunding, but they're using this system to bypass implementation of the Constitution. So the problem is not the Constitution, the problem is non-implementation of the Constitution. With regard to the austerity measures that the President is talking about, now austerity measures have been a song in this country for a very long time. And I agree we need austerity measures, but we need to go beyond that. We need, one, Parliament must reject this 8% VAT on fuel, because the cause of this 8% of VAT goes back to Parliament, because Parliament approved, the previous Parliament approved development schemes that were unsustainable. So the debt around the SGR, the Eurobond, and the subsequent borrowings to cover up for the Eurobond and the misapplication of the Eurobond, all of those went through Parliament and were approved by Parliament. Therefore, our debt crisis really is about the executive that made wrong decisions and our legislators in the National Assembly who did not say no to the executive at that point and went along and landed the country in debt. So when we talk about austerity, when we talk about cutting back, it shouldn't be the average Kenyan who pays. And I agree with the MP for Wajir, who says if you cut the equalization fund, if you cut the last mile connectivity, if you cut the money to county governments already are not receiving their allocations as they should, then what you're doing is you're saying anybody who uses public health services, agriculture, you're talking about water, you're talking about basic service delivery being clawed back in order to pay debt. So we are going for a very short-term solution because part of the reason we're not even able to pay debt is because government has overborrowed and is pushing business, actually is frustrating business. So you have lower, banks have retrenched quite a lot of stuff because of the interest rate cap. Interest rate cap is pegged on the heavy borrowing of government. So if you introduce more, more stresses on businesses, more stresses on the cost of living, you're actually going to slow the economy further down. So what should the administration do? The president has been bold in tackling corruption. He's been bold in working with county governments to deal with grabbed land. He needs to be bold and restructure the national government, restructure parastatals, get rid of CDF, let that money go into development. That's part of the austerity measures. We need to rationalize national government. The wage bill of national government has been growing, whereas the functions have moved to the counties. So we need a Marshall Plan to rescue national government from its own excess. So the president needs to accept mistakes have been made and then take bold decisions. And because of the handshake, he can actually get the support of the opposition to do that.
Let's take it back to the legislators. Of course, they will be responding to some of the submissions you've given and some of the options you think we have. I want to quickly put it to Rashid Kasim, who's completely against these proposals that have been made by President Uhuru Kenyatta. Those for it would say we are caught in a very tight situation. The president did not have a choice but to give us the options he gave us because one, look at the kind of wage bill we have, the kind of infrastructural projects that are being termed as unsustainable currently, and of course the kind of debt, both domestic and foreign, the country is in. What other options do you think we would have? Mheshimiwa Rashid.
Let me be able to say it here, that in regards to the head of state as far as leaving a legacy for Kenyans, you can really leave a legacy for building infrastructure, for developing JKL, or providing other major infrastructure in the country at the expense of Kenyans. You cannot borrow huge amount of money which will translate into future recovery to even our generation and the generations to come at the expense of the ordinary Kenyans. What we are saying here is that those legacies that head of state wants to leave at the expense of the living standard of ordinary Kenyans is one thing that we are against it as members of parliament. The legacy that the head of state should rather look for and should be able to implement is to fight corruption. Corruption has been responsible, and he did quite well over the last few months, that he has become forthright. He was very clear in his implementation to fight corruption. And he said it loudly and clear. That is a measure and a legacy that we will be proud of as Kenyans, as head of state, and we will be willing to save Kenyans a lot of money, which can be able to support a lot of infrastructure development. Two, one other recommendation that we'll be able to give is that look for other means, like where you have factored in a lot of expenditure on the NYS. You look at the NYS, the amount of money that has been factored for HYS, you remember very well how contentious it has been in the past. And there was a total misuse and pilferage of funds by NYS. These are critical areas where you can be able to shop from and be able to make savings to pay for the debt.
But you do not think the CDF should be touched, do you?
No, the issue I'm saying is that the CDF, the equalization fund, devolution, these are functions that are doing remarkable input into the lives of ordinary Kenyans.
All right.
CDF is developing schools, paying for bursaries, ordinary Kenyans' bursaries. They are doing that. The equalization fund is to bridge the gap in terms of development discourse that has been there for the last many years.
All right.
Look at devolution. Devolution in some certain areas in northern Kenya, the amount of money we have received in the past 7 years we haven't had it in the last 50 years Kenya has been independent.
Okay.
Some of us have never seen tarmac before devolution in our respective counties.
All right. Thank you. Mheshimiwa Munene,
when you deduct money from devolution,
yes.
Equalization fund, CDF, health, these are to finance functions that are basic.
All right. Thank you. Let me take you to your counterpart. Mheshimiwa Munene, do you really think by your decision to completely and overly support President Uhuru Kenyatta's proposals, do you think you're standing with Kenyans on this? And will whether the CDF will be touched or not, will it in any way influence how you will vote in the House on Thursday?
I think one issue you misunderstood, because I'm the one who made it very clear that the president is not reducing fuel, he is adding the price of fuel. And I said it very clearly that that's something that we won't support in Parliament. So I'm not supporting that in Parliament. But what I wish to say is this. The people who are working for the president, let me talk about Treasury. I think Treasury is not advising the president well, because Lotich and his team should sit down and advise the president on other ways of leasing revenue. Lotich cannot say that the only way we can lease revenue in this country is increasing revenue. At distance on that. There is no other way of leasing revenue, and there's fuel levy. So we want to say that the lackluster way in which Treasury has been operating for even the last Parliament, they have landed us in this trouble with the long advices. That's why we ended with Eurobonds and all those things. So I think it's the right time the president also cracked the whip on the people who have failed him. Secondly, as we discuss how the government spends money, and we want so much to concentrate on a little fund called the CDF. So many functions are devolved in this country. One, health is devolved. Two, agriculture is devolved. Three, water is devolved. Environment is devolved. But when I look at the budget today, the amount of money that is left with the ministries at national level, you wonder, what are they going to do with all this money? These functions are devolved. So I think at times, we have this negativity towards the Parliament that we lose the main focus, because if I look at the money that is left with ministries adoring devolved functions like health, environment, water, if all these ministries were to be looked at, we would have enough money for this country. Secondly, when we say there's a problem with the devolution, with the Constitution, we are not saying devolution is bad. Devolution is good, but you go to most counties, 40 or 50% of the money we devolve goes to paying salaries. So it's that time we looked at the structures of county governments and it took more money to development instead of recruiting, because we are devolving money to county and the 70% goes to salaries.
All right, devolution is key. Wanjiru, in under a minute, we are very stretched on time. What do you expect to see, especially from members of parliament, in the next coming days?
Unfortunately, what we're likely to see is what we've always seen, which is Parliament using the CDF as a bargaining chip against the VAT bill with the President. What we would want to see, and what Parliament, the occasion they should rise to, is to go for fundamental reforms. We are in a crisis. This is, I think, the third supplementary budget coming up this year because of this spending crisis. So it's time that Parliament actually Parliament has power of the purse. They are the ones who determine what government can spend and what they can't spend and what they spend on. So let us take this opportunity to restructure national government and release that money for debt repayment, for devolution. Let's increase the money to devolution, in fact, and let's rationalize the CDF so that it can fit into the constitutional dispensation.
Thank you very much. And that is the big story tonight. My guest in studio, Wanjiru Gikonyo, the National Coordinator for the Institute of Social Accountability, Patrick Munene, Member of Parliament, Chuka Igamba-Ng'ombe, and Rashid Kasim, Member of Parliament for Wajir East. Thank you very much, gentlemen and lady, for joining us tonight. My name is Akisa Wandera. Keep it KTN News.